connection, there we go. If we lose connection at some point in the meeting, we'll stop until we can get connection restored. So I just wanted to remind everybody of that. We in an attempt to not have to do another roll call, one more roll call than we have to, I will open the floor. Does anybody have any changes to the agenda that they would like to suggest? All right, hearing none, then we don't need to vote. We've got an agenda, so we don't need to approve changes to it. The only thing we'll need to approve the whole meeting, thankfully, is the minutes of our last meeting. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda?
Debbie Moore, so moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie and DJ. Thank you guys so much. Any discussion about the minutes?
Did you mean for the motion to be approving the minutes? You just made a motion to approve the agenda.
I'm sorry. Good job, Bren. All right. I would like a motion to approve the minutes. And so Debbie and DJ, can we count you in?
You got it.
Yes, sorry, I have to unmute. Yes.
Sweet. Okay, thank you guys. All right, any discussion about the minutes of our last meeting? Anything that you wanted to change? All right, then we will vote to approve the minutes, not the agenda, the minutes.
Are we using either Debbie or DJ to second the motion as well, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
Deborah Heckes seconded.
Tiffany Bretz?
Okay.
Thank
Real
you.
quick, hold up. Secretary Medrano is here. She's on the other side. Sorry. Okay, continue. Sorry about that.
Okay, Tiffany Bretz.
Yay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Johannes Camino,
Yes.
Brent Davis,
Yes.
Dale Decker,
Yes.
Deborah Heckes,
Yes.
Mark Lee,
Yes.
Deborah Moore,
Yes.
Joshua Orozco,
Yes.
Carlos Romero,
Yes.
Nancy Sauer,
Yes.
Mathis Cynic,
Yes.
Vince Alvarado,
Yes.
Director Chisholm,
Yes.
Bobby Erig,
Yes.
Carla Kugler,
Yes.
Secretary Cerna,
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Medrano. Oh, I'm sorry. Secretary Medrano, are you present?
Secretary Medrano, if you can click the link to move you over as a panelist. Here we go.
39 attendees. Oh my God.
Deputy
Yeah.
Secretary Medrano?
Just move. We'll go on.
Yes.
Daniel-
Sorry.
Thank you. Daniel Slagle,
Yes.
Councilor Sorg,
Yes.
Director Trapp.
Yes.
Madam Chair, we have unanimous approval.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so now we get to the meat and the hearts of our conversations today. Secretary Cerna is going to talk us through. Really, I mean, it was stunning when I started to hear inklings of this about where we're at with unemployment claims in the state. We have a PowerPoint that'll go with it, and you receive that in your inbox as well with the meeting notice. So Ricky, can I turn it over to you?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. John, did you want to share that, or you want me to share my screen? Either will work. Okay, great. And if you'll go ahead and go into presentation view, perfect. All right, cool. Okay, thanks everyone. Pleasure to see you all. Just a little disclaimer here, and full disclosure, I gave this presentation actually yesterday during the DOH COVID-19 update. So if you saw that, spoiler alert, it ends the same way. If you didn't, then it's I think it'll be very valuable for you. So this first slide over here is a look back right to June 7th of 2021, and shows by each program the change in claimants, the number of claimants receiving benefits. Just important to note that on each one of the dates here on the x-axis, that captures a 3-week look back. And we capture that 3-week look back because there's a lot of changes that occur with a single claimant, right? As they come in, they file their claims adjudicated and they start receiving benefits. And surely now you've got a waiting week. So that kind of captures all that activity, removes any duplicative stuff. So you'll see that in June of 2021, we had more than 77,000 claimants receiving benefits on all these programs listed here at the very bottom. On August 30th, I want to call your attention to that date primarily because it's the first full benefit week prior to the federal benefit expiration date, which was on September 4th. On August 30th, we had about 67,000 claimants receiving benefits. The week after the federal extension programs expired, those programs included pandemic unemployment assistance, a program developed for self-employed gig economy workers or claimants that otherwise weren't eligible for regular unemployment insurance benefits. Federal pandemic compensation ended. That was the additional $300 a week for claimants eligible for any program. PEUC, pandemic employment compensation, was an additional 26 weeks combined between those programs, and MEUC was mixed earners compensation for claimants that had both W-2 wages and self-employed wages. It provided an additional $100 a week to those claimants. So you'll see now that you'll see the cliff clearly on those federal extension programs occurring around 9/27/21, and that included about 50,000 claimants that came off of benefits. And so right now we're sitting at about 18,000 claimants that are receiving benefits between two principal programs. There's just under 11,000 claimants on what you would consider regular unemployment compensation, and about 7,500 receiving federal extension benefits. Now, we're required to provide federal extension benefits. There's a DOL trigger, corresponds with the state's unemployment rate and some other metrics. So that provides claimants with additional 13 weeks. So we've gone from about 67,000 claimants to about 18,000. And I saw the request here just to kind of go through these acronyms again. So I'll start with PUA. You'll see with trade assistance, there's rarely anybody on there. But with PUA is that pandemic unemployment, that's the self-employed. Federal extended benefits 1, federal extended benefits 2, pandemic employment compensation. That's they had 2 versions. The first was 13 weeks, and then the second was the second 13 weeks. And then the standard UI, of course, is the unemployment program that we administer under normal circumstances. Next slide, please. Thank you. I think this is important. I went ahead and put this slide in here because we were discussing, the workforce regions and performance reports this week, and I wanted to show, of course, this slide and explain it a little bit because at a glance, it says something different than what it really tells us on the back end. So what we're showing here are UI claimants active, but what we were really looking at is what the change has been since August 4th of 2021 through October 4th of 2021. So we're really looking for resiliency and vulnerabilities across the state, but on average, each of these workforce regions has seen a reduction of 70% in total claimants receiving benefits. The central region, to no surprise, right? It's got a booming economy relative to some parts of the state. The central region is seen as the highest decrease in claims over that period, which is about 73%. we're seeing a need to really concentrate our efforts in the southwestern part of the state. They've seen the lowest decrease in claims over this period of time. And so we've got to really hone in, right, on what kind of things are happening in forestry, agricultural industries and occupations in the southwestern part of the state. But this slide's important to kind of see, right, in terms of available workforce, that we have claimants in all parts of the state that are going to need our assistance, right, with employment services, job search, and training and workforce development. And we'll talk a little bit more in a bit about how we're trying to get that done. Next slide, please. So again, here you'll see on the southwestern part of the state, the counties that even historically, right, struggle with unemployment, high unemployment rates, like Luna and Sierra counties, Hidalgo counties. And so, you know, we always focused in on counties like Luna and McKinley and Lee. So this slide here shows you what the unemployment rates look like by county. And I think, again, it prompts really a priority for us to get down into those communities and understand what's happening there. Is it job availability? Is, you know, job loss? Is it workforce development? We got to understand how, you know, a virtual work environment now lends itself to, you know, getting jobs out to parts of the state that didn't exist before. And understanding where within these counties we have, you know, barriers like childcare deserts we need to work on addressing. On this table to the right, you'll see what unemployment rate is looking like statewide versus nationally, and you'll see that decrease from 7.6 in July to 7.2 in August for New Mexico, and a 2.1% change year over year. So, you know, we certainly expect that that'll go down. There's no question about that, but it's important to note, right, that in New Mexico, our rebound time historically has been lengthy. We fare well. Traditionally, New Mexico does okay relative to other states during an economic recession because of, you know, transfer payments like Social Security or federal jobs and resources that come into the state. But, you know, the recession recovery typically takes a long time. And if you go back to the 2009 recession, you know, in terms of just employment, generally speaking, it does take 8 or 9 years for us to fully recover. So we were looking at some really healthy months pre-pandemic. And then, of course, the pandemic kicked off the economic recovery. And, you know, some things to keep in mind here relative to other recessions is, you know, what's going to happen in terms of, you know, pandemic. And we're also taking into account, right, the calculated measures taken by health officials and our governor to reopen the state in a really calculated and safe way. So we're trying to understand what all of this is going to do to the workforce. We're looking at a tremendous amount of other data, you know, by education groups, by age groups, by gender, to make sure there's no disparities there that we need to address. So we're really trying to drive the train here by looking at the numbers. Next slide, please. Among all those metrics that are kind of driving our decisions is seeing where industries and occupations are, what they're doing relative to the number of claimants they had accessing UI benefits over the course of the pandemic. This slide here shows the change in claimants by last industry. What that means is when a claimant comes in to receive benefits, they're associated with an industry that they worked in previously. And so what we're watching for here, of course, is how quickly those employees are coming off of benefits and returning to the workforce. Now, we're in a bit of a balancing act here because there's two things that we're unsure of, right? One of them is, does this data represent just a cliff, meaning that they haven't necessarily gone back to work, but they're no longer on benefits? And if it represents that they've gone back to work, understanding the extent of which they return to that same industry. So as you're all aware, we receive wage data for all W-2 wage workers in the state of New Mexico. And the last quarter ended just a couple weeks ago, right, or a week or so ago in September. So over the next 40 to 45 days, we'll be collecting that wage data from employers. At that time, we'll be able to start making comparisons, right, between what we call a cliff report, meaning everyone that was on benefits, prior to September 4th, and then connecting them right to wage data and industries and occupations. And we'll be able to see a couple of things: how many of them are back at work, and two is, did they return to the same occupations and industries that they were working in previously. Next slide shows basically the same thought, except for occupations, right? So yeah, that's perfect. So it looks kind of the same. So you'll see here, right, that in terms of occupations, art and design, education and training, and personal care, claimants were peeling off at high rates. Tourism and hospitality is probably rounding off number 4 or 5 that we can see as of October 4th. But it is an area that we're focused on. So you'll see here, right, that in terms of claimants receiving benefits, about 8.6 of them are in the food prep, serving industry, and sales related, construction, extraction, office admin, really bring up the top 4 or 5 occupations that we're still serving in terms of claimants. We've been doing a lot of work in partnership with economic development, tourism, ECD, so that we can try and understand how together we can really help the tourism, hospitality related occupations and employers to get workers back into the doors and keep them there. As you're all aware, a number of things have been going on by way of wage increases over the last several months, but we're still struggling with a lot of, applicants, low applicants pools for these employers, high turnover, even, higher than it was previously. So we've really locked arms, and we in fact, just earlier this week, we had good conversations with hotel and restaurant owners in partnership with the Hospitality Association and Restaurant Association, because we've got a tentative plan in place that's a hybrid, right, of set aside dollars, early childcare assistance dollars, tourism and economic development efforts that we think will help us get some services and support out to the hospitality and tourism sectors across the state that help overcome barriers, help with wage reimbursements and things like that. So we're doing a lot of things behind the scenes that we hope will materialize very, very quickly for a lot of employers who are struggling with getting the workers in the door. Next slide, please. I thought it was important to kind of keep everyone, up to speed on the trust fund. You'll see here, going back to July, we see a balance similar to pre-pandemic levels, February 2020. So that on June 30th, you all recall, I think in a previous update I shared that there was a payment transferred over to Department of Finance Administration, use of ARPA funds to restore the trust fund balance to pre-pandemic levels. And you'll see, right, that it remains, relatively healthy. Right now, of those 18,000 claimants, right, about just under 11,000 of them on regular unemployment insurance benefits are being paid for from the fund. And then of those that are on federal extension benefits, that 7,000 number, they're 50% of their benefits are coming from the trust fund. So restoration was critical by June 30th because, of course, statutorily it's that balance that helps drive, the tax rates for employers for the upcoming calendar year. So we're in the process of working on those rates, considering the data omission requirements that we have in place pursuant to the special legislation changes. So we'll have those out pretty quickly and have a better understanding of what the impact will be for employers. On the next slide, again, because I was delivering this out to the general public, but I think it's important for us to understand that we're going to have a chore in front of us for several months, understanding what the impact of fraud was to the organization. There's still a lot of refusal to work reports that are coming to us from employers. There's still a lot of scams that are going out to all New Mexicans, not just those that were on benefits. Back in July, we stopped communicating with claimants via text messages because a lot of fraudsters were using text messages to get them to click on links, provide information, obtain credentials through spoof login sites and things like that. So we just kind of remind everybody that None of our staff will ever call and ask for social security numbers, passwords, or banking information. And we do encourage businesses who, who are struggling with bringing employees back that they know are on UI benefits, that they make those reports using those links. And if you know anybody that you believe is engaged in UI fraud, whether they're not, providing, bona fide work search reports, they're not reporting cash wages, or you're a victim of, or someone that's using identity theft as a tactic for unemployment insurance fraud, please let us know. We've set up these direct portals to make things simpler for New Mexicans to send that information to us. Next slide, please. Shifting gears a little bit here, of course, our focus has really been on getting New Mexicans back to work. In fact, for over a year, we've been working on the Ready NM project, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but you'll see here, online job postings and job availability is above 80,000 right now, and you'll see it going back to 2008. It's nearly a double down from where we were 11, 12 years ago. And you'll see where the job openings are on the table to the right. So, to no surprise, because I think we saw even pre-pandemic the need for us to really focus and hone in on pipelines and workforce development around healthcare and social assistance occupations. But you'll see there, right, where the high 10 or 12 industries are looking really to bring workers into the door. And so not only are we looking at where the jobs are, we need to understand where they are geographically across the state relative to what the unemployed workforce skills and education levels we're looking at right now. But you'll see essentially right there where employers across the state are looking for workers. Next slide, please. As you're all aware of the New Mexico Workforce Connection Centers, the next slide will show you a map of where they're where they're located across the state. The 23 Workforce Connection Centers, what we've been working on, of course, in partnership with all of the partners in not only within the New Mexico Workforce Connection Centers, but even agency partners across the state, is a lot of direct hiring events for employers and communities. For example, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be out in Roswell meeting with several employers. Then that'll really be the start of direct hiring events for multiple employers within the community of Roswell. We're doing events with ski bases across the northern part of the state to help them get the workforce that they need as they ramp up for the season. And so the offices are open. We have a couple that are still doing some by appointment services, but across the board, our offices are open for in-person services. That can really range from job search. They can come in and use our computers for job search. But mostly our wraparound services are inclusive of childcare, overcoming childcare barriers, transportation barriers, training, education, job matching. Of course, we have our targeted services for veterans, our vet reps. So clearly, we're ready to help New Mexicans get back to work. In terms of assistance to employers, we're ready to assist with applicant recruitment and customized screening. I know I've shared this with you all before. It can include, anything from, just posting the job on our WCAS system, our Workforce Connection online system, or, specific recruitment, screening, pre-employment testing, and screening. And so our job for employers is really about understanding what they need and getting them connected with the workforce who can fill those roles. If you haven't ever visited our WCAS system, it's robust. The resume builder is kind of like that springboard for a virtual recruiter, which means that we can post notifications to both job seekers and employers, right? That we feel that there's a match for them within the system based on skills and education and experience. And so we encourage New Mexicans to utilize it as a tool. We have more than 20,000 active job seekers that have accessed the system over the past, within a 3-month period. And so that's really the pool that we access. We're trying to make those connections for employers on top of that CLIF report prior to September 4th. And of course, on top of that is the list of claimants that are currently receiving benefits. On the next slide, just to kind of, remind you all that Ready New Mexico was a project we worked on over the past year with partners like ECECD and of course the Higher Education Department. And this really does kind of bring everything together in a couple of ways. One is it centralizes, the ability to connect with a career consultant or a business outreach specialist using that 800 number. And so if you're not located near one of the connections offices, the 800 number will get you in touch directly with a career consultant or a business outreach specialist. And so what Ready New Mexico does, I think, as a website, is it kind of centralizes everything together from the job search by county. We've funded the development of bootcamp, short-term bootcamp training opportunities, and we have more money left for institutions to access to continue to develop these training programs for available positions, information about adult ed, all of our secondary, post-secondary programs, including financial aid, assistance, apprenticeship programs, hiring assistance, and of course, everything is tied to labor market information so that, job seekers know whether or not they're entering or considering a pathway, right, that shows growth over time. The website also provides users with a live chat feature that also gets you connected with one of our career consultants. So really operating in a virtual space for so many months has helped us expand our services to those communities where, they couldn't walk into an office for assistance. So one of the things that we're exploring now and trying to understand if there's, going to be a good return for investment is an app for our workforce, our work cost system online, right? Whether or not, we feel as though that would be a good next step to getting, workers notifications on jobs that are available in a local area. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Some of the information you received before, but really what's changed since our last meeting has been that sharp decline in claimants, and certainly the conversations that we've had with industry about some of the struggles that they're facing with getting workers in. And we know from what we're hearing, and we know from national research that, there's still barriers by way of childcare assistance because of what's happening with schools. There are really barriers, related to public health concerns, personal health concerns. And we also know that workers are looking for something different, right? Not just in terms of what path they're on, but in terms of how they want to work for employers, from hybrid environments to entirely remote environments. And that does open up a lot of possibilities for New Mexicans to vie for positions that they normally wouldn't have access to, right? With large companies and corporations across the nation. So we're going to really work to better understand that from a data perspective and see how we need to shift what we do to respond. That's it, Madam Chair, and I'm sure to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ricky. Dale already has his hand up. I kind of figured he might. So those of you who have questions, just put your hand up and we will go. Yes, Dale.
So, Secretary Serna, kudos to your team for trying to stay out in front of this and providing the resources for people to get back engaged in the employment world. I have a question on the claimants receiving payments slide. And my question is are these unique claimants or is there double counting going on here?
Great question. No, these are unique, distinct claimants. They can only, at this time, they can only be on one program when compared to prior to September 4th, when they could be on both FPUC, which is that additional 300 plus another program. So these are distinct claimants.
Okay, and then just one other follow-up question. I think it would be really helpful to the board and also in our discussions statewide is to really understand the labor force participation rates in New Mexico. They're historically very low as compared to other states, which would suggest that we have a lot of people that could be in the workforce that aren't, which might suggest a couple of different things. Number one, maybe work from home or solopreneurs that don't kind of play into the system, but also just our robust cash trade and barter economy that we have, where people actually earn a living, but they're outside the system. Is there, so I just throw that out there as a comment, because I think one of the things that we could do in marketing our state for future economic development efforts is that we do have the human capital here, but we need to figure out how to get everybody engaged, at least to the point where we're par with the United States average, which is like 63% labor force participation rate. New Mexico's around 57%. So we got a lot of people that aren't in the system, and that's a lot of human capital that could play in the next normal and in the next economic development phase.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Member Decker, you're absolutely right. In fact, the other day I was, as we were having one of the many discussions that we've had about getting folks back to work, is wouldn't it be just great, right, to pick up the phone and call everyone that we understand is part of the workforce that we know is not working, and ask them what their status is. Are they looking? Are they not? Are they working as a self-employed gig economy worker, or are there barriers, right, that we need to start overcoming? And Yolanda and I actually talked for a long time about whether or not it was worthy effort to bring a contractor on board to really embark on a methodology for achieving that, and so that we can better understand, one, where they fit, right, in terms of buckets, and two, how do we start to get them, or to maximize that capital is the way you put it. So we have a lot of ideas that we've yet to identify kind of a methodology for achieving, but we're certainly interested in understanding how that human capital is really supporting themselves right now, and how we can advance that.
Thank you, Ricky. Bren, you got your hand up.
Thank you. Great presentation, and it's good to see that we're whole in the financial stuff. That provides a level of comfort from the I'll call it the sidelines. When I look at I think it's your slide 4, 5, and 6, and I'm going to say I should be more historically knowledgeable, but it would be nice for me to know how that, like our unemployment rate by county and by industry or last occupation, what that looked like before this whole COVID tidal wave hit us, just to see if there is a change in either geographically, like the oil patch, for example, and or you alluded to the fact that we've been well aware of a need for amping up our healthcare industry. So if at some point if we could see or know what that looked like historically, to me that'd be very informative to know where we're going, or if our course has shifted. But that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Right.
That's awesome. Yeah, and well, I'm going to hold my comment. As it relates to something that you said, I have been wondering this myself. Josh, you got your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary, for the presentation. Kind of an extension of what Bryn was saying on the slide showing the number of people getting benefits. I think you said something like 18,000 total are receiving benefits as of October. How does that compare to more or less October of like 2019 before the pandemic? Do you have kind of a rough idea of how it compares?
Sure. We actually, thanks for that question, Madam Chair, Member Orozco. We use the number between 8,000 and 9,000 as pre-pandemic kind of access to standard unemployment rates. So when you look at just the number of claimants on regular unemployment, which is about 10,700 or so, that number is, it's not scary at the moment, but it's when you add those federal extension benefits on top of that, we've more than doubled down on that number.
Got it, thanks. And then a quick second question. The slide with the links to report fraud, do you have something that's easily shareable, that's electronic, like a little flyer or something that I could send out to employers and maybe other employers could receive?
Sure, yeah, we've tried to push those out, but we know a lot of that information sometimes goes to, their TPA or their payroll service companies. I can have this put into just an email and ask for John to get this out to you all.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Josh. Nan?
Yeah, I concur. It was a really excellent presentation. One of the questions I had, I was actually looking with a lot of interest at slide 9 and the ramp up, if you will, in terms of job postings.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, it's an impressive change over time. I'm curious, do we have any mechanism to assess what we see the change over the next 6 months to a year looking forward to get a sense? And the reason I ask that is because I think, I know you've got a fairly extensive campaign to communicate opportunities across the state, and thinking about how we might get ahead of that and really, plan to, address this gap through communication and trying to get people at least aware of and hopefully interested in applying for some of these jobs. Obviously, there'll be education gaps in some places, and the state can work on partnering programs with regional colleges, et cetera. But I'm just thinking about, what does the next year look like? How do we get ahead of the curve in terms of communication about current and future job opportunities? Thank you.
Sure, no, thank you. We actually do. We can provide now on the DWS website, on our research page, we can provide that outlook for each occupation that's tied to these industries, right? Or occupation codes that USDOL and US Census uses. And so a lot of what we do within our offices, and a lot of what Title I is looking for when they provide supportive services to New Mexicans to get into an occupation, is that they see a positive outlook, right? So we can certainly share by not just industry, but if you look at just RNs, right, as a subsection or as an occupation within the healthcare, what that outlook looks like, how many jobs we expect will be added over the next several years. And so certainly it should be kind of a beacon that guides what post-secondary education institutions and other training providers are really looking at, especially regionally. And but some of these occupations, I think, are a little bit more complicated than just production, right? So for example, a couple of years ago, I led a year-long sector strategy statewide for registered nurses. And the solution there isn't just how do we just produce more of them, right? It's a pipeline issue. How do we produce more high school grads that are prepared to go into that program of study? How do we address, right, critical access facilities relative to urban facilities? How do we increase the amount of clinical placements, the amount of faculty? How do we neutralize what occurs when one hospital can offer someone 10,000 to come and another one can't? So some of these things are a little bit more complicated than just production, but certainly we have that information.
Thank you for that. Mathis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Stern, I want to follow up just on the comment that Dale made, and particularly in this aspect of understanding that group of individuals that is not in the workforce as per the way we define it and measure it. And I bring it up because I think there might be also lessons to learn as to how that alternative economy and way of subsistence, how that works, and what the community engagement is in terms of sustaining that, be it the barter trade or gig economy, whatever aspect it is, work from home. Those individuals may have a aspect to the way they're doing it that's a solution that is something that we could learn from in terms of expanding programs to capture that and amplify it. So the aspect about pulling them into the workforce may not be as accurate a statement as to identify how they're sustaining themselves and how we can build upon that. Just a thought.
Yeah. No, it's a great point and great feedback, right? If we need to strengthen their entrepreneur endeavors, then we've got to do that, right? If we've got to help them, in any way, however it is they're sustaining themselves. But I think it is important in terms of an economic development discussion. How do we really reframe, right, what otherwise could appear to be a state that's lagging if we know better that our workers are in a workforce, just not the W-2 wage one.
Yeah, that's really an interesting conversation. Thank you guys for these great questions, and thank you, Secretary, for really. I mean, you guys are so on the ball with this. There's things that as we've been going through this process, and I was watching the numbers myself over the entire pandemic of unemployed people, and I was stunned when I started hearing you guys understanding how many of those people were actually gig economy workers. Because I felt like, as I was communicating to my community about opportunities, I felt like what we were seeing was people who'd been displaced from, maybe a restaurant or a childcare center or whatever, but not understanding that a number of them were gig workers. It's a whole other audience. It's a whole other ask. It's a whole other target. And how do we communicate to that target? So when you saw the numbers drop off, it went from, if I'm right, Ricky, isn't it something like it went from 50 or 60,000 people to 18-ish thousand that were the traditional unemployed person? Is that right?
Yeah. Right before September 4th, it was about 67,000 on receiving benefits, and then after that expiration, down to 18.
Yeah. So okay, so that's a whole audience that isn't probably thinking about our system. And how do we access them? Because we know we have more jobs than job seekers. So it's just something for us to think about. And communication, as we've had these meetings around the state, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, communication, people understanding what the system even has to offer is a big deal. It's a big barrier. So, all right, Elaine, I was going to make comments, but I'm going to let you go because you have your hand up, and I'll finish my comments in a second.
I actually just have a clarifying question. Ricky, I really appreciate this presentation, very helpful for me. On the online job postings that you put up, that slide, I'm wondering if you could just clarify for me. I know that generally speaking, employed people say that they're a computer programmer that works at a hospital, they're listed as being healthcare. But I'm wondering in these job postings, if that is still the case, or if the computer programmer would show up as IT and only nurses would show up as healthcare.
Yeah, no, that can occur. I mean, so for example, using your example, you could have an RN in like 5 of these industries. You see, so for example, you have in education services, you could have RNs at a public school. So it's important, right, to kind of to put an asterisk next to those. That you're absolutely right that the occupation itself and that credential could be tied to multiple industries at once. And the other thing we're trying to tease out is, let's just say, for example, here, you have an employer who says, okay, I'm going to post my job with Workforce Solutions. And then a week later, I'm going to post my job on monster.com. And then a week later, I'm going to post it on Indeed. We're trying to really tease them out as saying, that's just one job. We don't want to count that as 3 different ones, right? So we're aware of those things so that we can try and clean all that information out. And then we, of course, are trying to make sure on the flip side of that is, if I have a restaurant that's posting for a server, if they really need to hire 8 of them, that we're also trying to capture that too, so that we don't misrepresent the number of vacancies. Because sometimes you have, an industry look at this and say, oh, no. I mean, we have way more than that. So those are some of the things that we're aware of that we try to untangle when we get this info.
And are we actually generating these data ourselves, or do we get them from Burning Glass or one of the other large data marts?
So we spider them into the WCAS system. So we start there and then we pull them all in, so that not only are they available to anyone from WCAS, right, but then we can run reports on them.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Elaine. Thank you, Ricky. So the last two things I was gonna ask about, well, maybe three, but healthcare and social assistance. Of course, we were all kind of shocked that in a pandemic that would be, an area with high unemployment. But I also understood that that category includes childcare centers, which we did know were deeply affected. Do you have a sense, Ricky? Is this still really healthcare workers who are displaced, or are we thinking it's more in some of those other sectors that comprise that industry?
Yeah, it could be anything from CNAs and long-term care facilities on up to physicians across the board. And we know that even pre-pandemic, right, this was among the fastest growing industries with gaps in employment. And so has it been compounded by the pandemic? Possibly so. We got a question yesterday about whether or not, on top of just concerns and burnout, whether or not, vaccination requirements and testing requirements is contributing to that. But we know across the board, a lot of families over the past 2 years have really learned to live in a different way and perhaps needing even less income. And we've known that as a characteristic of healthcare professionals in general, right? That you could have an RN that just needs to work 20 hours a week and can support, and contribute or support their family. So, that may be occurring at higher levels now too, given, the burnout that a lot of healthcare providers and daycare facilities, obviously, they're not opened at the same rate that we saw pre-pandemic, and we've been working to address it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I was just curious about that. Ready, New Mexico, we built in as we were doing it, and then we were part of a National Governors Association work group on this. There was a whole bunch of department people, and I was very honored to be a part of it. One of the things, is that there will be an evaluation, and I would love to share that evaluation with the state board in the future. But one of the things that continues to confuse me, and I don't think it's unique to New Mexico, but so we did all this work and we were so happy that we finally put HED and Workforce Solutions, on the same page with this one site, but the higher ed enrollments are down in the state. And so how does Ready New Mexico become a part of the vehicle of helping with that? And the reason I bring that up, Doña Ana Community College is, I think they were down like 10% or something like that. But when they looked at who wasn't coming back, it is the exact same set of people that would be, people served by a workforce center. They're people who have some barrier to employment. And so, how do we think differently about targeting the audience we really mean to target? And I don't know if as we go forward with Ready New Mexico, if we have the opportunity to think different about our targets there as well. So more of a comment than anything else, and just information to share. The last thing about workforce participation, I've been concerned since time immemorial as it relates to workforce with the cliff effect and the impact of people losing public benefits assistance in favor of taking a job where they may lose that, or a promotion, or or overtime or whatever. And the concern for me with the cliff effect is not just that someone didn't take that opportunity, it's that if they didn't take that opportunity, they're not going to have access to other opportunities in the future. And so really helping, and I would love to see this conversation continue about the impact of the cliff effect on the workforce of New Mexico, because I do think that that from the employer stand here, we'd heard that was a barrier already.
Yeah, Madam Chair, that's a great point. And that was something that emerged in our conversations with hotel and restaurant owners, right? I mean, hearing a comment like, I have employees who ask me not to pay them more and who ask me not to work them more than 24 hours in a week. And with an understanding that cliff is really what they're trying to avoid. And just as recent as yesterday, Dr. Grace and I had this conversation about creating this bridge, right, beyond the cliff, or an off-ramp, or whatever we want to call it, that essentially helps or takes New Mexicans away from that mathematical equation that says it's either this or not.
Right.
So we're working on that. We're in the process right now of understanding the overlap. So what we're providing is a list of everyone who was on our cliff before September 4th. And we're going to identify, of those 67,000 claimants, how many of them, are on SNAP, TANF, Medicaid, emergency rental assistance, WIC, and early child and child care assistance, so that we can understand, right, you know, where the overlap is among all of these resources and how likely it is that perhaps, you know, that's a barrier that we need to get beyond to get them. But that's a good point. We need to transition folks off of these transition benefits, so that they're not picking one or the other.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then I'm sorry, I did have one last thing. So in Texas, their Texas Workforce Commission, the child care money is in their workforce system. And interestingly, in El Paso, where, you know, we had built a relationship because obviously we were geographically very close, they showed me their budget once upon a time at Workforce Solutions Borderplex. And it was this pie. And 60% of their pie was child care money, because it's such a barrier. And as you guys are having these conversations with the new department, it's just something to think about, just something to throw out there, because that has been an enormously important piece of the success of the workforce system at the, you know, Workforce Solutions Borderplex, because of it was literally the one-stop shop for that. I can get my child care thing taken care of. So just throwing that out there for the future.
No more work, please. But let me tell you what we're doing now, actually, as part of the ongoing discussions with tourism and economic development, ECCD. Now our staff, our employment services staff, are going to be cross-trained to do those determinations for child care assistance for ECD, right? So we've got that partnership in the works, and Marcos is really excited. He thinks it's one of, you know, the more innovative things we've done. But all of our employment services staff will be cross-trained on doing that initial eligibility determination for child care assistance.
That's awesome. Yeah, those are just barriers we can get out of the way. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ricky. I appreciate, you know, letting us grill you and everything. So now at this point, I will take it over to the Restructure Transformation Committee update. Daniel, are you available? There you are. Okay, I'll let you and Yolanda take it over.
Right, thanks, Madam Chair. And I'd just like to remind everyone that Secretary Cerna is also the State Personnel Board Director, and he's wearing two hats right now. So the transformation work, the last we met at the governor's direction, the team was about to embark on community engagement sessions in all 4 workforce regions. The team has completed all but one, which will be done tomorrow in the Eastern region. We also did one with the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce to directly target businesses. The next step is to analyze the feedback. So at that time, we will have a much larger update for you all. I will say that participation has been relatively good despite the virtual nature of the sessions. There is some recognition that current performance is not where it needs to be. And you'll see more of that then on the next agenda item as well with the new performance measures. There is increased buy-in, I believe, for the need to transform our system. Where that leads us exactly is not yet clear. But as I mentioned, there will be a more thorough analysis of that work, the feedback work, to determine where we're going to go next, and also to present to the governor and to you all. So with that, I mean, we're not quite done with our work yet, so we're keeping it fairly brief here. Yolanda, would you like to chime in with anything else that I'm missing?
No, I think that's a good summary, because we're not quite done. Tomorrow is, you know, the last one, but Daniel, you did a great job of just summarizing where we are in the process. And I just want to thank everyone that's in the audience for sending, you know, interested community members and getting them signed up for the sessions. It's been a great opportunity to listen to the community. The best part of the process is we do a general briefing and overview of some data. We're presenting a lot of labor market information and just some really interesting statistics about what we need to think about as we're moving forward. And then the second half of the presentation is a SWOT analysis that we go through with the participants in a small group format. And everyone has been really wonderful, great ideas and feedback. So really appreciate the participants statewide that have signed up and are sharing their voice. And then I just want to remind everyone that it's still available for public comment. Individuals can send in an actual email to us. Let me get that address for you really quick. But they can send it to John, help me here. Let me look at this really quick. I never remember the email address. Open hiccups.
I'll type it in.
Yeah, well, we can't do that. So it's let's see, how does it go? State, I think it's board.swdb. Is that it?
Yes, at state.nm.us.
At state.nm.us. But if you've got some, constituents that you're working with in your associations or within your programs, and you want them to, please invite them to send in their comments or suggestions based on the information we can send out to you. Also, the presentations that we're delivering, especially the data book. We have had several of the board members participate in the community sessions, and thank you for attending, because I think it's also a great orientation for you as board members to get an understanding of what the conversation is. But we do have one more tomorrow. If you're interested in attending that, you can contact John and he'll get you, we can help get you registered for the session tomorrow. It's the last one. But we can also send the data book to you and the presentation that Tracy and I have. We start out with that process. Please share it with your association members, your colleagues, and if they have any suggestions or comments on that, we definitely are still taking all of that input. So thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, and it's been really interesting to just listen to people, because that they know what's going on in their communities, and they know, had somebody from Clayton talking about how it's just, they haven't had workforce services there in like a decade, and the challenge to their, to the people of their community, or, just different things that happen at the local level. So this was always about transformation. It was never about let's just do this one thing. It's always about how do we build the system to grow and to thrive and to serve more people and to serve more people better. And really, this has given us an amazing amount of information for us to think and process through that as we go forward. So, so once it's all gathered, then Daniel, the committee, we all will get together, and we're just going to kind of look at it, look for themes, look for, where points of tension are, where points of opportunity are, and try to basically come forward to all of you with an even more thorough recommendation for moving forward. Daniel, does that sound about right?
Yes, that's about right, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys. All right, let me go on to now the I would say dynamic duo, but it's a dynamic trio of Yolanda, Mags, and Christina, who are going to present on the yearly program review.
Actually, we're going to turn it over. This is our annual review. We've submitted our performance metrics and our data that we have to submit to USDOL. So this just kind of gives you an overview of the title, primarily of the Title I program and the funds that this is tied to the performance for the local workforce boards.
Can we use presentation view? Sorry, can we use presentation view so we can see it? There we go. Thank you.
Yes. And so Mags, Aragon is going to go over the data and just do a quick presentation. It's not going to go through all the slides, but he's going to pick up on the key slides just to help you understand where we are at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Yolanda. Thank you, Board Chair. Okay, so, and actually there is one slide that is not included in here. I do apologize. I didn't notice it until just now. I gave you a list. Can we go to the next slide, John, or whoever's controlling the, okay. So looking at this slide here, I failed to give you the statewide roll up of the numbers. So how the state actually did. I've given you the local, the numbers or the pass fails for all of the local areas. So I just want to kind of go over that real quick. For the adult program, we exceeded one measure, we passed two, and we failed one. And it's the skills game. For the dislocated worker as the state roll up, we exceeded one, we passed two, and failed 1, and it was the skills gain as well. And then for the youth, we passed 2 and we failed 2. And the 2 that we failed in the youth were the credential and the skills gain. So as Yolanda had stated, I'm only going to go over a couple of the slides. I'm just going to highlight some areas and then just explain to you how to look at the slides and what they're actually showing you. So, and then any questions that you have, please, I'll be here to answer any questions you have. So the first 4 sets of slides, and I'll go over each one of these. This is the performance for the local areas and how whether they passed or failed their measures. We've given you the last 3 program years so you can see a trend over time. In the central, you can see that for the most part they exceeded or met all their measures. They failed on their skills gains for the youth, which they're constantly trying to get that measure down and figure that one out with their service provider. But that seems to, the skills gain you'll see seems to be a thorn in all the board sides. It's just we need to figure that one out. Moving to the Southwest, you'll see that they've exceeded most of their measures, but they have a couple peppered failed. So their credentials in the dislocated worker failed. Their youth measures, they only met 1 and failed the other, failed 3 out of the 4 of those measures. Moving to the north, and this is one of the regions that we really have been working with and trying to, but if you look, they met 1 measure, the adult Q2 employment, and then failed all the way down across the board. And then in the east, if you move to the east, you'll see that just like the Southwest, they're meeting, exceeding their measures, and they have a couple that are failed, and you'll see it kind of all goes the same route, and it kind of goes the route of the pandemic. The youth Q4 employment, the credentials for the youth. It was really difficult to get individuals into those into trainings that could get them what they needed in order to pass the measures. So that's the performance pass fail. On the next slide, you will see business engagement. So this is the business engagement for the statewide. Businesses served statewide, we served 6,446 businesses last program year. Remember, program year is July 1, 2020 to June 30, 2021. So for those 12 months, that's who we served. The majority of our services were in the workforce recruitment assistance. That's helping with job orders, helping with placing individuals to jobs. That's where the bulk of our services were. And then we also helped with employer information and supportive services. So helping employers with any questions they have that are outside of helping them navigate WOTC, the Workforce Opportunity Tax Credit, those types of things. That's what you would find in the employer information and supportive services. The one thing I did want to mention, and it's not reflected on that slide, is we did see from program year 19 to program year 20 a drop of 15%. So we served 15% less employers than we did. We served 7,596 in PY19 and the 6,446 in PY20.
Max, just real quick, do you know what percentage of employers that number represents in the state? Like we had this other one where we knew it was 1 in 10. So are we now to assume that it's 1 in 15 or 12 or something like that?
Actually, I do, and if you give me a minute, I can actually look up that number.
Okay, well, finish what you're doing. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, while Christina's talking, I'll go look the number up and then I'll get it for you before her conversation's over. This next sheet I wanted to highlight, show you this slide is showing you the central and the east. This is looking at how the boards, the next two slides are looking at how the boards are spending their money. So the boards are required to spend 80% of their allocations within that year. So if you look at the central, you will see this is what we would typically expect a board to look like. Their last year's allocation was made up of 4 funding pots of money, a program year 19, a fiscal year 20, a program year 20, and a fiscal year 21 pots of money. So what we would typically expect, your older pots of money, your program year 19 and your fiscal year 20 should be zeroed out because they should be fully expended by the time the program year is over. And then your program year 20 should be fully expended by the time that program year is over. And then typically 80% of your allocations need to be expended. So that leaves you 20% of your allocation to carry you into the next program year before your funds actually, before your new grant agreement is renewed and you're set up. So if you look at the central, they've fully expended all of their pots of money. In adult, they carried in 18% of their allocation. In dislocated worker, they carried in 25%, and that's just to keep them afloat until the new year kicks in, and then they're off to the races again, ramping up, serving individuals. You can see that in the East, you have a similar situation. The only difference in the East is in the youth allocation, they, at the end of this program year, they still held on to 41% of their youth allocation, and they had not spent any of their youth allocation for the program year 20. What we did, because we had some discussions with them, with the East on that, carrying over that amount of money, because technically the state could have recouped that money and brought it back in so that we could have distributed out to the other regions, but the East presented us with a plan that said we're going to spend it. They have spent that money, so they're okay in their expenditures. Looking at, go ahead and go back to the next slide. Looking at the North, this is one of the areas where you're seeing a board that's not really spending the money in the way that it needs to spend. They still have in their PY19 at the end of the program year, they had 11% of their youth allocation. They haven't spent any of their youth money for their program year 20 allocation. So they're still sitting on that, and they're getting a whole new allocation of youth money. Plus they have that 100% of last year's allocation that they need to spend. So they have to get 80% of new money spent, but before they can spend this new money, they have to spend that 100% of old money. If you look at what they have as far as adults, they're okay. They're carried in 11% of their adult. They fully expended that adult, but their dislocated worker, you're seeing they're carrying in their PY20, they carried in 62% of their allocation, and they still haven't spent their F21 allocation there at 100%. And you see something similar. I won't go over the Southwest, but you see something similar if you look at the PY20 and the FY21, and you look at the percent remainings. Those should be low. They should not be high numbers. So that shows you a board that's not spending their money. Let's go to the next slide. This slide here is showing you, and actually I do have a correction on this. Built into our grant agreements, we require that the local boards spend 60% of their allocations on direct training expenditures. So we want the money to go to training participants, not to admin, not to salaries and things like that. This is showing you the percentage is what you need to pay attention to of who has met that 60%. There is a correction to this. The East, when the calculation was run, it was fat fingered. It's not 35.96, it's 43.71. But as you can see here with last program year, Only one board met the 60% training expenditure. That was the Central, and they were at 70%. The other regions were below that 60%. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next one. Okay, this slide here is showing you the allocations that the local boards got. So how much money they were presented in adult and dislocated worker. If you look at the blue lines are the adults allocation, the gray line is the dislocated worker allocation. The green line on here is how much money was transferred from dislocated worker into the adult program. So the boards can request a transfer of up to 100% of their dislocated worker funds to be moved into the adult funding stream, or vice versa. They can move adult into dislocated worker. What that does is it diminishes the pot of money that's available for dislocated workers, and it increases the amount of money that's available for adult. So looking at what the Central for their program year 20, they moved a small portion of their dislocated worker money into the adult, and you can see it didn't affect the dislocated worker. I'm sorry, the numbers that are at the bottom of each one that's locked in, those are the numbers of participants that were served in each one of those funding streams. So you could see in PY20 they served 781 adults, and it corresponds to their funding. And then you look at their dislocated worker, they served 433, and you see them transferring that money did not negatively impact, because they served 277 the prior year. So even though they transferred the money, they did serve more individuals. The one I wanted to actually point out to you, I believe, was the East. Oh, I'm sorry, the next slide, this next slide shows the same thing, only it shows the youth allocations and then participants served based on the youth allocations. Let's see, the Eastern, I wanted to point out the Eastern because you do see in program year 20, the East did transfer a majority of their dislocated worker money into their adult funding stream. If you look at and that may look bad on the face of it, but if you look, with that less money, they went from 73 participants in dislocated worker to 182. So they did double their participants. And if you look, they maintained their adult population. They stayed 476 to 468. So we can reasonably say that that transfer was to allow them to maintain their adult participants at the same level that they were trying to serve them at. And they do have, and the East does have good initiatives to serve their dislocated workers. And I think if you go through just the rest of those slides, I think that's, oh no, the last one shows if you keep going to the grid, keep going, one more. Okay, this shows you the allocations for this current program year. This is how much money the boards have received going into this new grant agreement. So when I was talking about the North not having spent their youth allocation, it was 1.2 million in their youth. If you look, they have to spend 1.2 million plus 80% of that 1.144 in order to meet next year's 80% obligation, which might be a huge task based on history, their spending history in youth. I don't know, Madam Chair, if you want to have any questions, or if you want to move to Christina's presentation on success stories, because it is a little bit of a different.
I think it would be good just does anybody have any questions or comments about that? Dale, go Dale.
I'm always going to raise my hand. Sorry, guys. Just real quick on the business engagement slide you have down there strategic planning / economic development activities. Could you put a little color to that, what that means exactly? And It just seems a little bit odd that in the southwest part of the state, where there was definitely did not meet, or had a lot of failed red things there, that they had a lot of activity in that area, even more than the central area, where there's probably more population and more business. I'm just curious to know what that means.
Okay, so those strategic plannings and economic activities, those are activities that the business engagement specialists are, they're working with the businesses to go over labor market trends, to explain what the labor pool looks like. It's more of just like a planning. It's like planning activities. Showing up to the business and saying, okay, here's what your industry looks like. Here's the projections for your industry. Here's here's your what is it? The number of individuals who actually, your labor pool, how many people are looking for jobs in the system, in our system, and then helping them work through, explain that and help them work through that. So it's more of just an information imparting activity.
And this kind of a follow-on question, and I know that Daniel Schlegel's on the here as well. The state is going to, sometime in October, State Economic Development Department, through an EDA grant, is going to release a economic recovery and economic development plan for the state of New Mexico. And I am just wondering how this is, how workforce solutions in our area people could be used as a information tool to businesses relative to what that plan says, and how that word could get out to businesses, because I think that clearly that strategy that's being developed by EDD impacts everybody throughout the state. So I just throw that out there for
and if I may, so Madam Chair and Member Decker, I have participated in those conversations with EDD. So I was a part of the planning committee, and I was participating in the strategic planning development, met with the consultant and participated in some work groups so that we could talk about how that would be aligned and what would be some of the things that we could do to enhance that work and really coordinate it. I really am impressed with the plan that they have overall. I think there's going to be some increased opportunities, especially for our business engagement teams, to be part of sector strategy work that they have planned and targeted for the strategies, one that we have listed in our state plan, but also because they do mirror each other and they're in alignment with where the governor has also outlined those key economic sector strategies that we need to work with. The activities that they've outlined really gives us an opportunity to align and really pull in our business engagement teams to support that work by doing exactly what Mag's talked about. I think where DWS is, where our strength comes in, is really around the kind of research, the labor market information, using our data to help them inform some of the decisions that they're making, but also some of the strategies that we're using or the kinds of outreach activities that we're doing with businesses. I think it's the opportunity for us to actually strengthen that and make it more cohesive. Right now, I think we kind of work at, they're over here and we're over here. We've aligned ourselves with economic development too, because we have some shared positions that we've never had before as well. So we are actually co-funding positions that have a history with us. The two individuals know our system, know how we work. They're actually working for economic development, and we're linking how we do our work so that we can make sure that it is aligned.
Just one other quick comment. It seems to me that this is a huge opportunity for workforce solutions to actually play a quarterback role in these regions, particularly with our community colleges, because I would assume that the plan that's going to be put forth has to be linked to some kind of workforce training, retraining, upskilling strategy. And this is where our robust community college network throughout the state could be a huge asset in repositioning our workforce to align with the goals and aspirations of the economic development strategy. And clearly you guys could play a big role in that, your business engagement folks. So.
And they have a lot of intentionality around that, especially aligning the community colleges, making sure that they've got the right kinds of tools, resources, and information to help them plan and strategize what their offerings are going to look like. I was really impressed with that part as well, where it's very intentional. There's a real strong partnership with HED that's being built. So, and I think it also is on the heels of what we're doing with the Ready New Mexico piece, right? Where we actually brought in with higher ed and online, we're making these certificate offerings available across the state, but it also gave us an opportunity to look at how it's being offered, where there's duplication, but where's there opportunities to leverage. So I think there's some really good work that's going to come out of this plan. EDD did a really good job of really kind of guiding all of us to making sure that we're all working towards these common goals to make sure that part of the system is also communicating and working collaboratively.
Well, and I want to just, Dale, you're making me think of something. So one of the things that, these community meetings are surfacing is, about just awareness. Nobody knows what the system does. They think it's the unemployment office. They don't have any clue of all these things. So my understanding is that money for communication is always an issue because of the funding formula for the administration of the system. Well, if we're going to be partners, maybe we need to get their help, because maybe higher ed and EDD need to help us with promoting the system to help support, the goals of their plan, to help support the goals of Ready New Mexico. Maybe we need to have a bigger communication strategy where people who have more money than we do are also telling this message, because for sure for higher ed, it's a benefit, because people don't go to higher ed because they think they can't afford it. If they don't know they can use the workforce system to afford it, then that's just a missed opportunity. A really good conversation to be had around this. So anyway, just throwing that out there. Okay, Christina, I guess you are up with part 2.
A bit before Christina, before you start, Madam Chair, 10%. That 6,000 is 10% of our.
So it is we're still 1 in 10. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mags. I appreciate that.
Perfect. Thank you. John, if you could go down to, I believe it's slide 22. There we go. Thank you so much. Okay, so my portion, I am the local workforce board liaison for DWS, and part of my role is collecting quarterly success stories from all of our boards. The USDOL has us collect these quarterly and submit them, and then it goes to their national office to provide them with what we have been successful at doing in each of our local areas on a quarterly basis throughout the program year. And what's highlighted on each one of these slides has to do with just that. And while the boards have experienced multiple challenges this last program year, the following slides are those collections of the success stories for quarters 3 and quarters 4. And the compilations are collected, like I said, every year, every quarter, and then they're passed on to the national office for USDOL. The first one you'll see is from the Northern Board. They had, we have to break it down by dislocated worker, adult, and youth participants. And then of course, some youth are in school and some are out of school youth. And this particular example has to do with an out of school youth, adult participants, and dislocated worker. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I think it's especially good to highlight these success stories so that you as a board can really start to see what's happening around the state. And then we can go on to the next one for the central area. Again, a lot of really great stuff in these sector strategies that are happening specifically in the central area, and getting people into healthcare opportunities and some really good employability and skills training. Next slide. Here we have the Eastern area. I have to brag on the Eastern area a little bit. They had a really terrific entrepreneurial opportunity for youth specifically that had a lot of great success with regards to encouraging youth participants involved in these entrepreneurial programs. So I would definitely love for you all to take a look at what happened there. And if you want to be provided with more success stories on that area, please take advantage of that. And the last one we have is the Southwest area. Again, some great stuff happened with youth. This was an in-school participant, and then our adult participants and dislocated worker. I think that's the last one. It is. So again, very brief, but I want you all to be able to see some of the good things that are occurring in your local areas around the state. I went over that super quick because I know we are short on time, but are there any questions as far as how these quarterly reports are collected, what that looks like?
I just want to add one thing, and it's just to bounce back to the East area, or the Eastern area, and their entrepreneurial program. Really well done. Received some national attention as a promising practice. I know that Beth and her team have been in contact with the federal program officer and was singled out, essentially for just the good work that's being done there. What I really enjoyed about that program, it's done in an intergenerational model where a young person is paired with an older individual, and they have to go almost kind of like through a Shark Tank process where they're presenting an idea, a new business idea, and actually a lot of them actually get off the ground and they're implemented, but it takes through the paces and an opportunity for the young person to learn with someone who's had some business experience, maybe not as much as they need either, but together they're learning the ropes of being an entrepreneur, all of the things that are involved in terms of a startup for a company and the pieces that they need to do. But what's really amazing is the presentations are done by these two, by the individuals that are working together. And it was very sweet to just see that level of camaraderie between a young person and an older person, and what they learn from each other and how they actually have taken an idea. And you can actually see and hear the kind of like the technology side of the young person influencing how a business idea gets taken off. I was real impressed with the project. Beth has done a really good job. The Eastern area has done a really good job of engaging the business community because they act as a judge, kind of like reviewers to actually give input and guidance into the business ideas that they come up with. They actually go through courses together, they learn together. So we don't have a lot of entrepreneurial types of programming going on statewide. This one makes a whole lot of sense. The Eastern area is in a region where entrepreneurialism is huge, and it's important in rural communities because it is oftentimes it is those smaller businesses that actually need to be stood up as a way forward. And so I really just want to take time to acknowledge the Eastern area and the work that they've done there.
And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out those quarterly success stories to John so he can disseminate that to the board, because
we have those. They're in our
okay.
packet. We do.
Good,
They're just at the end of this presentation. But yeah, thank you for that. And they are great stories. And I wanted to say thank you to the East as well. The one way that would be potentially easy to scale some of this good work is the Arrowhead Center out of NMSU, because it is our land grant institution. The Arrowhead Center is an entrepreneur accelerator. It does have a youth component. It is available in every county in the state. And so, Beth, I know you're on the call. If you would like me to connect you with Kathy Hansen at the Arrowhead Center, it might be an interesting way to share what you're learning and have something scaled to other regions in the state, you know, just to be of help. Okay. So thank you guys so very much. And so now I'm going to turn the tables over to, I'm going to start with Carla and Veronica, but Carla, as you guys know, is with the Associated Building Contractors in Albuquerque. And we were having this discussion about training programs that are not just higher ed, that we have tons of training programs in the state, and really thinking comprehensively as we're looking at people who are not engaged in the workforce, who are not employed, you know, how do we leverage these assets that we already have in the state and really more meaningfully weave them into the workforce system? So Carla, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, I'll take it from here. And I know that you craftfully made this, that I loved how every presentation prior to this, my little soapbox bill, it has teed me up for this. And I know you did that on purpose, and I really thank you. Because as we talked and we looked at our figures about business engagement, and I will tell you that it also warms my heart to hear Secretary Cerna's presentation about working with the Hospitality Association and the Restaurant Association. I really think that it kind of aligns well with what I, kind of wanted to talk about, which is making sure or trying to make sure that our local workforce boards are really leveraging the power of associations. Full disclosure, so I also sit on, I am an association executive. I also sit on the Society of Association Executives. And as I've been doing this, it has opened my eyes to many of the associations, also that, a good portion of what they do is train. At what we have been known for as far as associations is really more of advocacy or lobbyists. And that's neither here nor there. It's nobody's fault. It's just the way that we have, with government officials, with the general public, legislators, I have found that myself in my dealings, that we are looked for advocacy and lobbyists. And I will speak for myself, but also most of the associations that I have, dealt with, that is a small portion of what we do. Myself includes less than 20%. And the other part, a great deal, is being a service provider to our industry. Ours is training, and I know with other associations that rings true with a lot of industries, right? With healthcare, with manufacturing, with technology, with agriculture, that those associations already do a lot of training. But because they don't consider themselves post-secondary, they don't consider themselves even eligible to utilize the ETPL system. And I think as a workforce board member, right, I want to see our clients and the community and the individuals that we serve skilled, right? We want to see them upskilled. We want to see them reskilled. We want to see them get the education and the training and the certifications that they need. More than anything, we want to see that turn into actual employment. And I think where leveraging the power of associations helps fill that gap where it is turning into actual employment, because associations, their members are the employers. The associations are boots on the ground service providers to employers. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there as far as when we talk about business engagement and how we've talked about restructuring our local workforce boards. I have been told, and I've been reminded, that I have been spoiled. We deal with primarily the central region, which is the highest performing region. But we do service the state, and we do try and work with the other local workforce boards. And I believe that really might be help fill a gap and help some of the other rural areas. These associations are already and I don't want to say organically, but they've already been aligning themselves with very similar sector strategies. They are in the areas that they service where that industry is. So I just wanted to kind of make it known that we should probably start trying to figure out how to use the associations more as a resource, or at least get in front of them to see how, what kind of certifications and trainings and things that those employers are already going to those associations and utilizing them from, how we can better service the clients. It won't take away the need to find people into them, but once we find them and we expand those services and training, that's a great way to turn into actual employment.
Yeah, thank you for that, Carla. And, when we were talking about this prior to the meeting, your point was really very well made that employers already trust the training programs of these associations. And if these training programs are not woven where applicable, where woven into the workforce system, then that's a disservice to the job seeker, because it could be a quicker, it could be, it could be a better, it could be whatever, but it's a direct pipeline is your point. It's a direct pipeline to the employer. And it's just another asset that we have in our state that we should be considering.
And many associations, and we're one of them. I know that they have either MOUs with community colleges. They're already working within that system. So, and they've got the pathway to, direct entry into to employers. So I just wanted to kind of, again, get on my soapbox and just remind them that I don't think associations are giving themselves enough credit because they don't consider themselves post-secondary, but they do provide services and certifications that are greatly needed throughout their industry. And I think we should probably start kind of figuring out how we access that, because it really does fill the gap.
Well, thank you for that, Carla. So Veronica, realizing that we have limited time left, do you want to share with us, sort of not necessarily the entirety of the ETPL process, but maybe where you see some opportunities are for us to think about this?
Sure. So what's my limited time?
you got I'll give you 10. How about 10?
Okay, so yeah, definitely not enough time to go through the entire PowerPoint.
Well, I kind of noticed that.
Yeah, so just quickly, we have a state policy in regards to the eligible training provider list. So you can find that on our website. Go ahead, John, next slide. Within that policy, it's going to explain what is the ETPL? Why do we have the ETPL? Why is it necessary to have an ETPL? So in short, in order for our boards to be able to expend their training dollars on classroom training, the institution, the association, the post-secondary institution, public or private, a community organization must apply to be on the ETPL. They do go through their local board first. That is their first point of contact. So wherever they reside in, they would contact that local board, and then that would initiate the conversation and the process as to what does that institution need, what does that organization need to provide in order to be considered to be on the ETPL. Next slide, John. So again, eligible providers of training. You're right, Carla. The associations may not realize that they are eligible providers. Our eligible providers consist of post-secondary, public, apprenticeships, registered, pre-apprenticeships, community organizations, and even our adult education and literacy. Next slide, John. So what can the funds be utilized to pay for? So they acceptable credentials that count towards our performance is associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, occupational certificates, certifications, licensures, and certificates of industry and occupational skills, which certainly aligned with what those associations are doing. Next slide. Title I funds cannot support master's degree programs. So, and what types of trainings are back up, John? Right there. Okay, so what types of trainings can be paid for? They can be one or more classes, and it could also, it helps towards a secondary school diploma or its equivalent, leads to employment, and then it's a measurable skill. So earlier when Mags was talking about a lot of our boards were not meeting the measurable skills gain, we believe that that's just a data entry, probably not so much that they're not meeting the measurable skills gain, but we do look at that when we are assessing the training provider who is wanting to be on the ETPL. Does it lead to a measurable skills gain? Next slide. And then there are certain types of trainings that are exempt to be on the ETP. So for example, OJTs, when we talk about OJTs, work-based learning, customized training, incumbent worker type trainings, those do not have to be reviewed or submitted to be on the eligible training provider list. Next slide. So there are some non-occupational skills trainings that also do not have to, that are not required to be on the eligible training provider list. We reference those types of trainings as workforce prep activities or short-term pre-vocational services. So under workforce prep activities, it would be examples of basic academic skills, critical thinking skills, digital literacy. And then under short-term pre-vocational, it could include development of learning skills, interview skills, professional conduct services to prepare an individual for unsubsidized employment or training. Again, they do not need to be on the ETPL. They also do not count towards the credential attainment for Title I. Essentially what that means is we can pay for the training, but it will not count towards the board's performance. And those short-term pre-vocational trainings, those workforce prep trainings, are reviewed, approved, and managed by each of the local boards. So they are communicating with that post-secondary institution, with that community organization, public, private, with that association. They are working directly with them and they are reviewing, approving, and managing. They do not have to submit those programs to the state for final approval because they do not live in the ETPL list. Next slide. So the process again is they contact, in order for an institution or a training provider, they contact their local board. They work with that local board to meet all of the eligibility requirements to be on the ETPL list. Once the local board has reviewed and vetted that they meet the basic eligibility requirements, their occupation and demand, their sector strategies, their local plan, all of that good stuff, then the final submission is to the state administrator to approve for the program to be on the ETPL. Next slide. There is an initial eligibility and there's a continued eligibility process, which means that for the first year, the program is approved for 1 year, and then they must reapply to be on the ETPL list. And then if they are approved, and they are approved for 2 years. So they have to reapply then every 2 years. And every 2 years, they must also be vetted again for those eligibility requirements. One of those eligibility requirements is who is their higher authority. So it's very easy for us to, for our post-secondary institutions, public or private, because there's already a process for them to go through our higher education department to be given the authority to provide training services in our state. But if they are not a public or private post-secondary institution, that's where there's a little bit more work that has to be done. We have to figure out who is giving that association, who is giving that organization, who is overseeing that they are providing the adequate training in our state, and that they're given permission to provide training in our state. Next slide, John. So this is the continued eligibility. Go ahead, next slide. So performance. So any training provider who is on the ETPL is required to report performance information on all students. So we have a MOU with Higher Education Department where we are able to receive the performance that we need for those institutions who are reporting to higher ed. Unfortunately, if they are not reporting to higher ed, then that requires for that institution, that provider, to self-collect the data and have to self-report the data. In order for an institution to meet the eligibility for continued eligibility, they must provide the overall performance of credentials obtained, entered employment. They are the same, they're very similar to our other performance measures that we have to meet under Title I. Next slide. I just wanted to quickly show everyone, where do you find the eligible training provider list on our website? So here's a quick screenshot. You go in as an individual, you can go in as a guest. You don't have to have an account created. You'll click on training and education programs. Next slide. And then voila, there's the ETPL list. And so you will be able to see what programs are on the list, what the program leads to, who's the provider, and at the very far right, what is the total cost of that program.
This is really awesome. So let me ask a question then in light of all of this, and see, you got the whole thing in 10 minutes. Excellent. Excellent. So, okay. So what I'm hearing then is they don't necessarily have to be on the eligible training provider list to have a program participate in their training. Not necessarily, but it's about working at the local board level to determine, is this a good thing, right? So number one, how do we get barriers out of the way? Number two, it seems to me, Carla, you might ought to have Veronica come to one of your meetings to share this information with these associations that don't realize they're offering something of value, because the benefit to the local workforce board is that it will get their credential and skill gain numbers up, which we apparently, struggle with throughout the state. So this is, like I said, I'm just thinking of this in the terms of assets. And this is like such a win-win-win-win. So, Carla, what do you think about that? Does that help bring awareness? Do you think if to bring awareness of this information and these opportunities to those association executives?
Yeah, I definitely think it would. And I think, the associations, knowing that they have the local workforce board, that's the process in which they need to take, right? Dealing with their local workforce boards. Similar to our discussion earlier, where a lot of people have the idea of workforce solutions being the unemployment office,
right?
Where associations are seen as a business advocacy group. I think we need to fill that gap and create that bridge where the local workforce boards are working with industry, with their associations, in order to provide, credentials, client services, and ultimately, a path right, straight into employment.
And we're happy to present to any organization. We do that in collaboration. I say we, myself, do that in collaboration with the local boards. We have, we've tried to have throughout the last 2 years, in absence of a state conference, a workforce conference, we've held about 2 or 3 these last 2 years presentations on what is the ETPL, what is the process, how does that work? And so I think it's just, you know, making sure that everyone is aware that we're providing that, and anyone can attend those trainings.
Yeah, no,
We're
and
definitely open as needed.
yeah, no, great. And I think it's wonderful. And I think that, and that's part on the associations as well, right? I think many of the associations need to learn how to better navigate the local workforce boards. I think it would be a benefit to its membership. So it just takes advocacy.
And we would serve more businesses because we'd be working with the associations that already hire the graduates. Yay! Yeah. This is such a win-win-win. Okay. Well, ladies, I hope you guys can go off and make beautiful music together on behalf of, you know, all these people that have, you know, something really, I think, of value to offer. So thank you, Veronica, and thank you, Carla, for bringing this up. And, you know, as we as the state board need to play a role or be of help or whatever, you know, we're always happy to do that. Just being mindful of our time. I did want to let you know that we didn't get like somebody who registered for public comment. We had somebody send in a very lengthy, detailed, well thought out letter for public comment from an organization called Respectability, and it is very thoughtful, it's very detailed. There's some key points in that, and so what I would like to do is have John, in the follow up to this meeting, he will send you their letter. It's several pages long, but it's got some very good things for us to think through. And where I really think it goes is in our conversation that we're having around transformation and making sure we're weaving in those public comments into the overarching work that we're doing statewide to collect public input. So I just wanted to say thank you for that very well thought out set of comments, and we will share that with the full board. The board chair has no comment other than to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you for a very rich discussion, and for us to just continue looking for opportunities to support the state through this economic recovery time. Thank you all for being great leaders right where you sit, and for bringing what you know and what you have to offer to this table. So thank you guys so very much. Oh wait, Mark Lee, you got your hand up.
Hi, I just want to make a little comment. Local news in
Sure.
McKinney County, which is third highest unemployment rate in the New Mexico state. We just broke ground next expansion factory for medical glove. We are hiring 350 people in the process. A lot of them are engineers and mid managers.
Wow.
And then the following year with the McKinney County, we're going to be hiring 550 people. So hopefully that will take the needle a little bit in the McKinney County area, but we'll have about 900 people hiring locally. So just want to give you a little bit of local news.
That's great
rest
news.
Of the people.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. That's great news. And so, yeah, somebody from the Northern Board needs to get on the phone with Mark here pretty quick and see what opportunities we can line up for the folks that are in the Northern region. Dale, you have your hand up.
Just real quickly, that's fantastic news because those are economic based jobs, but there's also the spinoff factor. That for every manufacturing job, you're creating 2 to 3 service sector jobs in the economy. So this has a much greater impact on that economy than the 900 jobs. So congratulations to Mark Lee and McKinley County.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dale. And yes, it's everybody wins, right? One job, and it has all this impact. It's the ripple in the pond thing. Everybody wins. Well, thank you guys so very much. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day and look forward to seeing you again in a couple of months.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.